My suitcase thudded onto the porch as I fumbled for my house keys. After a challenging yet enlightening year studying with monks in Nepal, I couldn't wait to simply be home and see my beloved garden. Honestly, the flight had been excruciatingly long. My muscles ached fiercely, and all I truly wanted was to collapse into the familiar comfort of my own bed. That's precisely when I heard it, the unmistakable grating sound of shovels digging into earth. What on earth? I rushed around the side of my house and froze, utterly stunned. 5 strangers, conspicuous in matching blue vests, were systematically digging holes all over my backyard. My beautiful prize-winning roses? Gone. My carefully tended vegetable patch? Completely destroyed. And in their place, unbelievably, stood small, uniform granite markers arranged in unnervingly neat rows. "What are you doing?" I shouted, dropping my backpack in disbelief. "Get off my property right now!" The workers looked up, clearly confused, maybe even a little startled. Just then, a woman in a crisp, expensive-looking pantsuit marched toward me, clipboard clutched firmly in hand. "Excuse me," she stated coolly, pushing designer sunglasses further up her nose, "but this is now Pinecrest Gardens Memorial Grounds." She sniffed dismissively. "You can't be here." Before I could even formulate a response, my neighbor Eleanor came running across the street, her customary gray curls bouncing with urgency. "Thank goodness you're back," she cried, relief washing over her face. "I've been calling and emailing you for months." The pantsuit woman frowned, annoyed. "Eleanor, you know this person?" Eleanor grabbed my arm protectively. "This is the owner," she emphasized, looking pointedly at the woman. "This is whose house and land this is." The woman's face went utterly blank for a moment, then slowly reddened with a mixture of shock and anger. "That's impossible. The HOA determined this property was abandoned after 6 months of no contact." Frantically, I pulled out my phone, scrolling to show her my travel documents and visa stamps. "I've been on a sabbatical in Nepal. I paid all my bills months in advance and notified the post office." "That doesn't matter," she snapped dismissively. "HOA bylaws clearly state—" "I'm sorry," I interrupted, my own anger rising. "But who exactly are you?" Eleanor answered before the woman could launch back into her bylaws. "This is Brenda Miller. She somehow became HOA president about 3 months after you left." Brenda straightened her jacket, regaining her composure. "As I was saying, according to Bylaw 47B, properties deemed abandoned can be repurposed for community needs. We voted unanimously." My head spun as I surveyed the utter destruction of my yard. 12 years of painstaking gardening completely gone. The Japanese maple my mother had planted years ago, the intricate herb spiral I built stone by stone, all replaced with these markers. "Are those headstones?" I asked, horror creeping into my voice. Incredibly, Brenda actually looked proud. "Memorial markers," she corrected with an air of satisfaction. "We've been selling plots to community members who want to remember their loved ones or reserve spaces for themselves. It's been quite profitable, actually." "Profitable?" I felt my hands shaking, my voice rising. "You're selling pieces of my property?" "Community property now," Brenda corrected sharply, glancing at her watch. "Now, if you will excuse me, we have the Peterson Memorial Service at 3:00 p.m. You'll need to leave." I stood my ground, planting my feet firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, my land, and I have the deed right here to prove it." Brenda signaled dismissively to a man in a security uniform loitering nearby. "Gary, please escort this person off the premises." Eleanor immediately stepped between us. "Brenda, you can't do this. I told you months ago the owner was traveling." "Your input was noted at the meeting, Eleanor," Brenda said coldly, her voice like ice. "The vote was still unanimous." As Gary approached, looking distinctly uncomfortable, I noticed something peculiar. Behind where my garden shed once stood, a different kind of digging was happening. Several men in dark jackets were carefully removing something from the ground, placing items meticulously into clear plastic bags. "What's happening over there?" I demanded, pointing. "And where is my shed?" Brenda's expression shifted instantly. Something flashed across her face. Was it fear? "That's a separate matter. We found certain irregularities during the initial excavation." Eleanor leaned close, whispering urgently, "They found something buried under your shed. The FBI has been here for 3 days." "The FBI? Under my shed?" Suddenly, my grandfather's stern warning echoed in my head from years ago. Never move the shed. Never dig there. What's buried stays buried. I'd always dismissed it as him being overly dramatic. Now, Brenda was speaking rapidly into her phone, shooting nervous glances my way. "Yes, the owner has returned." "Yes, completely unexpected." "No, they don't appear to know about the discovery yet." One of the men in dark jackets looked up, noticed me, and began walking purposefully toward us. As he got closer, I could clearly see the letters FBI emblazoned on his jacket. "Ms. Miller?" "And," he said firmly, addressing Brenda, but looking at me, "we need to speak with the property owner." Brenda pointed at me, her finger trembling slightly. "Apparently, this is them." The agent turned to me, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. "I'm Special Agent Davies. We need to talk about what we found beneath your property." "I've been gone for a year," I said, bewildered. "I have absolutely no idea what's happening." "Nevertheless," he replied evenly, "what we've uncovered appears to date back to the 1940s. Did you know your grandfather, Harold Mitchell, worked for the federal government?" Of course, I knew Grandpa worked for the government. He told endless, though always vague, stories about his work. He'd left me the house with strict instructions about the yard. Instructions I'd foolishly ignored by not securing the shed better before I left. "He mentioned it," I said carefully. Agent Davies gestured toward his colleagues, who were still carefully excavating. "We found a waterproof box containing documents marked classified. Very old, but still technically sealed government property." Brenda stepped forward immediately, clipboard raised like a shield. "This discovery further justifies our community's claim to this land. Clearly, there are national security issues at stake here." Agent Davies gave her a look that could freeze lava. "Ma'am, this is now a federal investigation. The HOA has absolutely no jurisdiction." As Brenda sputtered protests, Eleanor squeezed my arm again. "They found something else, too," she whispered urgently, "before the FBI came. Brenda told everyone not to talk about it." A chill ran down my spine. Agent Davies handed me his card. "We'll need you to come downtown for questioning tomorrow morning. In the meantime, please don't discuss this matter with anyone." As he walked away, Brenda's phone rang again. Her face paled dramatically as she listened. "What do you mean we don't have proper permits for the memorial garden? We're the HOA. We don't need—" She stopped, listening intently. "What document? From 1947? That's impossible." She glared at me then, with such raw hatred that I involuntarily took a step back. "This isn't over," she hissed, before storming off toward a group of confused-looking memorial service attendees. Eleanor helped me gather my bags. "Come on, come stay with me tonight. Your utilities might be off, and honestly, I don't trust Brenda not to try something." As we walked toward Eleanor's welcoming house, I glanced back at my transformed yard, the FBI agents carefully working beneath where my shed once stood, Brenda furiously making calls. "Eleanor," I asked quietly, "what exactly did they find before the FBI showed up?" Eleanor looked around nervously before answering. "A metal box," she whispered, "with your grandfather's name on it. Inside were photos of your grandfather with J. Edgar Hoover himself and documents about something called Project Insight." Brenda opened it before realizing what it was. My grandfather with the founder of the FBI, Project Insight? None of this made any sense. "There's something else," Eleanor added hesitantly as we reached her door. "The deed they found, from 1947, it wasn't just for the house." She lowered her voice to barely a whisper. "It apparently gave your family ownership rights to something the government still uses today." Sunlight streamed through Eleanor's guest room curtains as I stared blankly at the ceiling. My mind was racing. Last night's incredible revelations about my grandfather, the FBI's presence, and whatever Project Insight entailed had kept me tossing and turning until dawn. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Eleanor entered cautiously, carrying coffee and toast. "You have a visitor," she said, looking a bit nervous. "Agent Davies is in the living room." I quickly dressed and went downstairs to find him examining family photos on Eleanor's mantelpiece. "Sorry to intrude so early," he said, turning toward me, "but developments overnight have significantly accelerated our timeline." "What developments?" I asked, accepting the steaming coffee Eleanor offered. "The documents we recovered," he explained, his tone serious, "trace back to the very founding of modern FBI forensic methods. Your grandfather, Harold Mitchell, wasn't just any employee. He essentially established our first forensic science division." I nearly choked on my coffee. Grandpa never mentioned anything that specific. He just said he worked for the government. Agent Davies nodded knowingly. "Many early employees maintained strict secrecy, understandable for the time. But that's not the primary reason I'm here." He placed a thick folder on the coffee table. "We found your grandfather's will among the buried items. It's quite unusual." Inside the folder was a yellowed document, sealed with official-looking government watermarks. My hands trembled slightly as I carefully read the archaic legal language. "To my descendants, I leave not only my property and worldly possessions, but also the rightful ownership of all methods, processes, and intellectual frameworks catalogued within Project Insight. The United States government maintains a perpetual license to utilize these methods, conditional upon proper acknowledgement of ownership and reasonable compensation." I looked up, utterly confused. What does this mean?" "It means," Agent Davies said slowly, letting the weight of his words sink in, "that your family technically owns the intellectual property rights to core forensic methods the FBI has been actively using for over 70 years. Eleanor gasped audibly beside me. I couldn't speak. The concept was too staggering. "According to our legal team's preliminary assessment," he continued, "your grandfather structured this unique arrangement so that ownership would remain private but compensated. However, records indicate payments abruptly stopped sometime in the 1970s, likely when the Bureau couldn't locate any family members after your grandfather passed away." My mind reeled. "So, the FBI owes my family money? Potentially substantial sums," he acknowledged gravely, "but naturally, that creates significant complications, especially given your current situation with the property." Just then, through the window, I could see Brenda Miller and 3 men in sharp suits marching purposefully toward Eleanor's house. "Ah, that would be the HOA lawyer and, I suspect, a real estate developer," Agent Davies said, checking his watch. "Right on schedule." The doorbell rang sharply. Eleanor hesitated, looking at me, but I nodded for her to answer it. Brenda burst in, followed closely by the suits. "There you are," she said, spotting me immediately. "Your presence is requested at an emergency HOA meeting this afternoon. We're voting on the final disposition of your former property." "Former?" I challenged, standing up. "I still hold the deed." One of the suits stepped forward smoothly. "Arthur Finch, HOA attorney. According to Bylaw 47B, as you know, your property was legally transferred to community ownership after 6 months of verified abandonment. I didn't abandon it, I countered hotly. I was on a documented sabbatical and had paid everything far in advance. Unfortunately, Finch continued, his voice slick, notification requirements detailed in Section 12A were meticulously fulfilled. Notices were posted on your door and subsequently published in local papers. Without response, the transfer proceeded legally. Brenda smiled, triumphant and smug. The Memorial Garden stays. Agent Davies cleared his throat pointedly. Actually, gentlemen, Ms. Miller, there's a significant federal interest in this property that unequivocally supersedes any HOA bylaws. Brenda's smile faltered instantly. This is a local matter. Not anymore, Agent Davies replied curtly, producing his badge. The items recovered from the site relate directly to ongoing federal operations and fall under strict national security protections. The second suit, previously silent, looked alarmed. What items? The HOA wasn't informed. Exactly, I interrupted, finding my voice. You began extensive digging without proper archaeological surveys or permits, potentially disturbing historically significant artifacts. Brenda's face reddened again. We followed all required procedures, including permits for establishing a commercial cemetery, I asked innocently. The third suit, clearly the developer, paled visibly. Commercial. Brenda, you explicitly stated this was a community memorial garden, not a commercial venture. Brenda shot him a warning look. It's a community service, with suggested donations for maintenance, of course. Interesting, Agent Davies mused, consulting a file, because we have records of numerous payment transactions directly to the Pinecrest Gardens HOA for specific memorial plots, totaling over $200,000 in just the past 3 months. Arthur Finch adjusted his tie nervously. Perhaps I should review those transactions before we discuss this further. You do that, I said firmly. Meanwhile, I've been doing some reviewing myself. I pulled out my phone, bringing up emails I'd discovered in my inbox overnight. These messages are from concerned neighbors, sent while I was away. They specifically mention you, Brenda, rejecting their information about my travel plans. Eleanor stepped forward bravely. I told the entire board he was in Nepal at the monastery retreat. I even showed them the farewell email with contact information. Brenda's composure finally cracked. The board voted, it's done. Under false pretenses, I shot back. You deliberately withheld crucial information to get your pet project, that memorial garden, approved. The developer looked back and forth between Brenda and me, aghast. Is this true, Brenda? Of course not, Brenda snapped, though her voice lacked conviction. This is all just a misunderstanding. We can resolve it at the emergency meeting this afternoon. About that meeting, Agent Davies interjected smoothly, federal agents will be present to discuss the classified materials recovered and the serious legal implications of disturbing a potentially protected historical site. Just then, Brenda's phone buzzed loudly. She checked it, and her face went from red to deathly white. Problem, Brenda? I asked sweetly. Nothing, she said far too quickly, but I glimpsed the message preview. Know about the money, meeting cancelled. Simultaneously, the developer checked his own phone and frowned deeply. I've just received notice, he announced, looking bewildered, that all Pinecrest HOA accounts have been frozen, pending investigation. Brenda's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. That's impossible. On whose authority? Mine, said a new authoritative voice from the doorway. We all turned to see an older woman in a formal, impeccably tailored black suit, flanked by 2 more serious-looking agents. Agent Davies stood straighter. Director Vance, we weren't expecting you personally. The director nodded briefly to Davies before fixing her piercing gaze on me. When a report crossed my desk that Harold Mitchell's grandchild had been located, I had to come myself. Your grandfather saved my father's career with his forensic innovations years ago." She then turned her attention to Brenda, who had gone completely pale and seemed to shrink under the director's gaze. "As for the frozen accounts, Ms. Miller, that's standard procedure when we discover potential embezzlement of federal funds." "Federal funds?" Brenda stammered, aghast. "We haven't touched any federal money." Director Vance smiled thinly, a chilling sight. "The moment you sold the very first plot on that specific piece of property, Ms. Miller, you were misappropriating federally protected assets. The intellectual property rights alone associated with the materials buried there are valued in the millions." The room went utterly silent. Brenda sank weakly into a nearby chair, her carefully constructed empire crumbling visibly before her eyes. "What happens now?" I asked quietly, the enormity of the situation settling in. The director handed me a thick, sealed folder. "That, Ms. Mitchell, is largely up to you. Inside is everything we currently know about your grandfather's work, the property's historical significance, and your potential options moving forward." As I took the folder, I noticed a small, old-fashioned key taped securely to the inside cover. Attached was a note, unmistakably in my grandfather's handwriting. "For the hidden room beneath the rose garden. Some secrets are worth protecting. Some are meant to be revealed. Choose wisely." I looked up, completely shocked. "There's a hidden room under where they've been digging graves?" My hands trembled slightly as I later opened the door to find Agent Davies standing on my porch again, the silver badge he flashed catching the muted evening light. "Good evening," he said, his tone professional but hinting at the underlying gravity. "We need to talk more about what was found on your property and what it implies." A familiar chill ran down my spine despite the recent revelations. I stepped aside, inviting him in, while trying consciously to hide my racing heart. The weight of Grandpa's long-ignored warning still echoed. Never let anyone see these papers, not even people who say they're from the government. Had he anticipated even this? Agent Davies's polished shoes clicked against my hardwood floors as he followed me into the living room. Family photos lined the walls, including one cherished picture of Grandpa shaking hands with several men in distinctly old-fashioned suits. "Is that Harold Mitchell?" Agent Davies asked, stopping abruptly at that specific photo. "My grandfather," I nodded. "How did you know his name?" "Every FBI agent learns about Harold Mitchell during basic training," Davies replied, his eyes widening slightly as the connection fully clicked. "He practically invented modern forensic investigation." "Wait, you're Harold Mitchell's grandchild?" I gestured toward the couch. "Please sit down. Would you like some coffee?" While I prepared drinks in the kitchen, I watched Agent Davies through the doorway. He wasn't just casually looking. He studied the room carefully, his professional gaze lingering on Grandpa's old, heavy desk tucked in the corner. "Those documents the HOA uncovered," Davies began, as I returned with 2 steaming mugs. "They detailed founding operational procedures, techniques still partly in use today. Your grandfather literally created the blueprint for how we investigate complex crimes." I set down the cups a little harder than intended. "Those papers belong to my family. The HOA had absolutely no right to dig them up, let alone call you." "Actually," Davies clarified, "they didn't call us directly. A contractor working on the garden recognized some government seals on the initial box they unearthed and reported it, following protocol." He leaned forward slightly. "But here's the part I still don't understand. Why were highly classified documents from the 1940s buried under a simple tool shed in a suburban backyard?" My heart pounded. This felt like a pivotal moment, a decision point Grandpa might have foreseen. Taking a deep breath, I walked over to Grandpa's desk, unlocked the cleverly hidden bottom drawer I hadn't known existed until finding the key, and removed the worn leather folder I'd discovered inside, the one I'd never shown anyone before. Just before my grandfather died, I explained, placing the folder carefully on the coffee table between us. He gave me strict instructions about this house, about the shed, and about this. Inside were his will, the original deed to the property specifying unique conditions, and meticulously drafted documentation legally transferring ownership of all his intellectual property directly to me, his heir. He said someday someone might come looking, and I should be ready. Agent Davies carefully examined each document, his professional composure visibly cracking as his expression grew more shocked with each page he turned. The legal language, though dated, was crystal clear and ironclad. Harold Mitchell had shrewdly retained full ownership rights to his groundbreaking methods and forensic innovations, merely licensing them to the government under very specific terms and conditions. "Mom," Davies finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, "do you fully realize what this means? The FBI has been utilizing proprietary methods that legally belong to you for decades, apparently without fulfilling the compensation clause since the 70s. The room fell silent as we both processed the staggering implications of this revelation. Through my window, I noticed Brenda and her husband, Greg Miller, standing across the street, pretending to check their mail, but clearly watching my house, phones pressed tightly to their ears. "Your HOA friends seem very interested in my visitor," I remarked dryly, nodding toward the window. Agent Davies glanced outside and frowned. "I recognize that behavior. They're calling everyone they know with connections, trying frantically to figure out what's happening and how to spin it." He gathered the documents from the folder with utmost care. "The HOA has absolutely no idea who they were messing with, and frankly, neither did we until today." As he prepared to leave, Davies paused at the door. "Ms. Mitchell, what do you ultimately want from this situation? Given these documents, you could potentially make things very, very difficult for the Bureau." I thought for a moment, the anger and shock slowly solidifying into resolve. "I want my property restored to its original condition, and I want the HOA, specifically Brenda Miller, and anyone who knowingly enabled her, to leave me completely alone," I answered honestly. "I don't want government money or unnecessary trouble. I just want my home back, the way it was." Davies nodded slowly, seeming to appreciate the directness. "I need to take these documents immediately to my superiors, including Director Vance. This changes absolutely everything about our approach, both to the documents and to the HOA's actions." He handed me his card again. "Please don't speak to anyone else about the contents of this folder until you hear from me directly. And whatever you do, don't give the HOA or their lawyer any more information than they already have." As his unmarked car pulled away, I saw curtains twitching all along the street. Almost immediately, Eleanor hurried over from next door, concern etched deeply on her face. "What did the FBI want this time?" she whispered urgently. "Brenda's telling everyone you're being investigated for something terrible, trying to turn the neighborhood against you." I managed a genuine smile for the first time in what felt like days. "Actually, Eleanor," I said, feeling a surge of unexpected strength, "it looks like my grandfather left me more than just this house. He left me a very effective way to fight back." That night, sleep was impossible. The knowledge that I held significant legal leverage against both the FBI and the HOA filled me with a volatile mix of empowerment and anxiety. What would Grandpa, the meticulous, secretive strategist, want me to do with this unexpected, powerful inheritance? The answer began to crystallize just before dawn. Along with a newfound steely determination. The HOA, under Brenda's reign, clearly thought they could bully me because I lived alone, kept mostly to myself, and had been away. They were about to discover just how profoundly wrong they were. What no one in Pinecrest Gardens knew, not Brenda, not Eleanor, not even Agent Davies yet, was that before my sabbatical studying ancient philosophies in Nepal, I'd spent 15 years working as a highly successful paralegal specializing in complex property and contract law. The legal documents spread across my bed weren't just dusty family heirlooms. They were potent weapons in a battle I suddenly felt uniquely equipped to win. As the first light of day crept through my windows, I began to formulate a multi-pronged plan, one that I felt would make Grandpa proud, leveraging both the law and the FBI's vested interest. But the question remained, would I truly be brave enough to see it through when Brenda Miller and her HOA allies inevitably unleashed their full fury against me? The bright red "refused" stamp scrawled across my carefully drafted cease and desist letter made my blood boil. Brenda's petty, handwritten note at the bottom added insult to injury. The Pinecrest Gardens HOA has unanimously voted to fine you $500 daily until you stop interfering with ongoing community improvements. Please respect the wishes of your neighbors. I crumpled the insulting paper, watching through my kitchen window as an elderly couple, unknown to me, placed flowers beside a small headstone located precisely where my award-winning vegetable garden used to thrive. The grotesque transformation of my backyard continued unabated, despite my legal demands. Benches were installed along newly laid pathways, and unbelievably, a small, cheap-looking fountain had been erected where my beloved bird bath once stood. The ringing phone interrupted my simmering anger. It was Agent Davies. "Ms. Mitchell, are you free to meet later today? My superiors, including Director Sterling, would like to discuss a proposal regarding the licensing situation." 2 hours later, I found myself seated in a sleek, anonymous downtown office building across from 3 individuals. Agent Davies, a sharp woman introduced as the FBI's chief legal counsel, and a silver-haired man who commanded the room without saying a word, Director Sterling. "Ms. Mitchell," the director began, his voice calm but resonant, "I knew your grandfather Harold many years ago. A brilliant man." He slid a thick folder across the polished table. "We have thoroughly verified your ownership claims regarding Project Insight. The methods Harold developed and documented remain fundamental to our work, and based on his original agreement, you are indeed legally entitled to compensation." The lawyer spoke next, her tone precise. "We are prepared to offer you a substantial settlement figure for retroactive licensing fees, plus generous ongoing annual royalties for continued use." I took a breath, surprising even myself with my newfound confidence. "Respectfully, Director, Counsel, I don't want money." Their eyebrows collectively rose. "I want my property fully restored to its pre-excavation state, and I want the Pinecrest Gardens HOA stopped. They are systematically destroying my home and hiding behind manipulated community bylaws to do it." Director Sterling exchanged glances with his colleagues. "What if," he proposed carefully, "we could potentially assist you with both problems? Your grandfather was immensely important to this organization. We protect our own, and that sense of loyalty extends to their families." The proposal they outlined was unprecedented. The FBI would discreetly provide resources and legal support to help me reclaim my property and hold the responsible HOA members accountable. In exchange, they sought fair, formally negotiated licensing rights to Grandpa's methods moving forward. Critically, They would investigate the HOA's actions for potential legal and procedural violations, while keeping my newly confirmed ownership of the intellectual property strictly confidential for the time being. We cannot directly intervene in a neighborhood dispute, legally speaking, Agent Davies explained. However, we can investigate permit violations, potential destruction of historically significant artifacts, which those documents certainly qualify as financial irregularities, and clear misrepresentation in official HOA documents and meeting minutes. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. For the first time since returning to this nightmare, I felt a tangible sense of hope, a pathway forward. The sunset painted the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple as I turned onto my street, only to see Greg Miller, Brenda's husband, standing belligerently in my driveway, his face flushed with anger. I parked carefully and stepped out, maintaining a cautious distance. "Can I help you, Mr. Miller?" "Whatever the hell you're doing, stop it now!" he shouted, stepping aggressively closer. Brenda received 3 calls from Washington, D.C. today. People asking pointed questions about permits, land deeds, historical registrations. Neighbors' curtains twitched noticeably in surrounding houses. I stood my ground, consciously remembering Director Sterling's advice: don't show fear. These types of bullies feed on intimidation. "I'm simply protecting what legally belongs to me," I replied calmly, keeping my voice steady. Perhaps the HOA should have conducted proper research on this property before they started digging it up and selling plots. Greg's finger jabbed accusingly toward my face. "Listen carefully. Brenda has connections you wouldn't believe. This neighborhood runs smoothly because of her hard work. You're nothing but a troublemaker, Mr. Miller." Agent Davies' calm voice cut sharply through the tension as he seemingly appeared out of nowhere beside my car. I hadn't even heard him pull up. "We need to discuss your HOA's unauthorized excavation impacting federally protected property." Greg Miller's face instantly drained of color. "Federal property? What are you talking about? Who the heck are you?" Davies subtly flashed his badge. "Your HOA disturbed a site containing historically significant materials directly related to the founding operations of the FBI. Materials that were intentionally secured there decades ago by Harold Mitchell himself." I watched with grim satisfaction as Greg's aggressive posture completely collapsed. This is ridiculous. It's just a regular house in a regular neighborhood." "Is it?" Agent Davies countered smoothly, pointing upward toward my roof. "That weather vane, for instance, it isn't merely decorative. It's an old-style FBI marker designating former safe houses or operational sites. Your HOA really should have checked the historical property records more carefully before voting to convert it." Tom backed away hastily, nearly tripping over his own feet. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the threat sounded utterly hollow now. After he scrambled away, I turned to Agent Davies, puzzled. "Agent Davies, there's no FBI marker on my roof." "There is now," he replied, with the faintest hint of a smile. "Installed discreetly this morning while you were meeting with the director. Sometimes, Ms. Mitchell, perception matters significantly more than precise reality, especially when dealing with bullies." That night, emergency text alerts pinged relentlessly through the neighborhood, announcing a mandatory HOA meeting scheduled for the following evening. Eleanor called me immediately, her voice fraught with worry. "Brenda is furious. She's telling everyone you've threatened the entire neighborhood with government intervention over some old papers. People are scared, confused." I thanked her for the warning and spent the rest of the night preparing. The additional documents I'd found in Grandpa's truly hidden safe, concealed behind a loose panel in the basement bookshelf, told a story even the FBI didn't seem to fully know yet. It spoke of a property purchased specifically to hide sensitive evidence of early, controversial bureau operations deemed too risky to document officially at the time. The next morning, Mrs. Peterson, a kind widow in her late 70s, stood hesitantly in my yard, placing fresh flowers on what she heartbreakingly called her grandson's plot. When I approached gently, her eyes filled with tears. "Please," she begged softly, "please don't take this away. Brenda promised we could remember our lost loved ones here. My Tommy, he has no other memorial." My simmering anger at the HOA faltered instantly, confronted by her raw, genuine grief. "Mrs. Peterson," I said softly, "I am so deeply sorry about your grandson, but this isn't a real cemetery. There's nobody actually buried here." "It feels real to me," she whispered, clutching the flowers. "Brenda said, she said you were away so long you didn't care about this land anymore." Her words hit me hard. Had my year away inadvertently made the neighborhood believe I'd truly abandoned my home? Had Brenda deliberately targeted my property because she assumed I wouldn't return or wouldn't fight back if I did? I helped Mrs. Peterson arrange her flowers, then gently explained that while I couldn't allow my entire yard to remain a deceptive, illegal cemetery, I would fully support creating a proper, beautiful memorial garden in the nearby community park. "Really?" she asked, surprised. "You'd do that, even after everything?" Her surprise made my heart ache. This was never about punishing grieving people. "This isn't about punishing people who miss their loved ones," I assured her sincerely. "It's about stopping those who abuse power and manipulate others for their own gain." As she left, looking somewhat relieved, I noticed Greg Miller parked down the street, blatantly taking photos of our interaction with his phone. Clearly, the HOA was gathering ammunition for tonight's showdown. I needed to be ready. Agent Davies called mid-afternoon, his voice tinged with excitement. "We found something very interesting in the archived county records. The original property survey plat from 1947 shows your land extends a full 15 feet beyond the current back fence line, including the section of creek bank the HOA uses for their annual duck race fundraiser." I smiled as a new facet of my plan formed. "That's fascinating, Agent Davies. Would you happen to have a verifiable copy of that survey I could perhaps bring to tonight's meeting?" "Already sealed in an envelope on your porch," he replied promptly, "along with some other public record documents you might find useful. Director Sterling sends his regards." The package contained exactly the documented leverage I needed to confront Brenda Thompson and her HOA allies head-on. But as I meticulously prepared my presentation, a sliver of doubt crept in. Was I taking this too far? Would fighting the HOA using their own tactics, albeit legally, make me just as bad as them in some ways? Then I found the final item Agent Davies had included in the package, a faded newspaper clipping from 1947. It showed my grandfather, looking proud, standing beside a newly planted oak tree right in my front yard. The caption read, "FBI forensics pioneer Harold Mitchell creates community memorial grove for agents lost in line of duty." My property had indeed been a memorial once, but a real one, established with purpose and meaning, not Brenda's manipulative, commercialized fake graveyard. Tonight's meeting would determine whether I could reclaim that authentic history and my home, or lose everything to the HOA's unchecked power grab. Could I honor Grandpa's complex legacy while somehow finding a solution that might heal, rather than further divide, my fractured neighborhood? Camera flashes popped as I walked purposefully into the Pinecrest Gardens Community Center. The emergency HOA meeting had clearly drawn a much bigger, more agitated crowd than anyone, especially Brenda, had anticipated. 3 local news vans were conspicuously parked outside. Brenda's attempt to handle this escalating disaster quietly had spectacularly backfired. "That's her," someone whispered loudly as I made my way down the crowded aisle, "the one fighting the graveyard." Brenda stood rigidly at the podium, her knuckles white as she gripped its sides. Her normally perfect bob haircut seemed extra stiff tonight, mirroring her forced, brittle smile. "Before we begin," Brenda started, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly, "I want to remind everyone that our community rules exist for a reason." She scanned the room, attempting to project authority. "Some people think they can just disappear for a year without a word, and then question our decisions when they finally decide to come home." Murmurs rippled through the tense crowd. I noticed Eleanor giving me a subtle thumbs up from the 3rd row. "President Miller," I called out clearly, my voice steady and carrying through the room, "maybe you should tell everyone about the certified letters I sent updating my address while I was away. Or perhaps explain the homeowner's dues payments that mysteriously weren't processed right before the abandonment proceedings began." Brenda's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. This meeting isn't about mail. It's about one selfish homeowner trying to ruin a beautiful memorial garden that's bringing comfort and solace to dozens of families." Right on cue, Agent Davies and 2 serious-looking government lawyers stepped through the main door behind me. "Actually," I said, standing up and turning to face the crowd, "this meeting is about something much, much bigger." I nodded to Agent Davies, who calmly connected his laptop to the overhead projector. The room gasped collectively as black and white photos filled the large screen. My grandfather standing proudly beside J. Edgar Hoover, cutting ribbons at facility openings, receiving medals. "What you're looking at," I explained, letting the images sink in, "is classified history. My grandfather, Harold Mitchell, established the FBI's first forensic division right here, back in 1947. As a measure of thanks and security, the government deeded our family this specific plot of land because of what lies beneath it, sensitive historical materials." Brenda lunged toward the microphone. "This is ridiculous, preposterous. She's making all of this up." Agent Davies stepped smoothly forward. "Mrs. Miller, neighbors," he stated calmly but firmly, "I'm Special Agent Davies with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I can confirm that everything Ms. Mitchell is stating regarding her grandfather and the historical significance of the site is accurate." He paused for effect. "More concerning, however, is what our preliminary investigation into the HOA's recent activities has uncovered." The lawyer beside him opened a file. "The Pinecrest Gardens HOA proceeded with major excavation without obtaining the proper county or state permits. You disturbed federally protected historical artifacts. And most seriously," he continued, his voice hardening, "we have compelling evidence suggesting that certain members of the HOA leadership knowingly falsified documentation submitted to the county, claiming the property was legally abandoned." Brenda's husband, Greg, jumped up defensively from the front row. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, we can," I said quietly, nodding toward Eleanor, who stood up bravely, holding a thick binder. "My neighbor, Eleanor, has meticulously kept copies of every official HOA meeting minute for the past decade, including," she added, her voice clear and strong, "the minutes from the meeting where you, Mr. Miller, first suggested using forged paperwork to seize my property right after I rejected your insultingly lowball offer to buy it last year, just before I left for Nepal." The room erupted. Neighbors turned on each other, shouting accusations and demanding answers. Some still defended Brenda, while others looked utterly betrayed. "Enough!" Brenda screamed, her carefully maintained composure completely shattering. This neighborhood was perfect before you came back. We needed that land. The property values, were never your primary concern, I finished for her, my voice ringing with conviction. This was always about power and control for you, Brenda, not about community spirit. Agent Davies cleared his throat, silencing the room. Given the documented historical significance of the site, the clear evidence of procedural wrongdoing, permit violations, and potential fraud, he announced gravely, the federal government is now prepared to invoke eminent domain on the entire Pinecrest Gardens property, pending further investigation. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. The implications were enormous. However, the government lawyer added quickly, my superiors are willing to limit immediate federal action solely to the improperly seized property currently in dispute, provided that the existing HOA leadership immediately steps down, new elections are held, and all fixtures related to the unauthorized memorial garden are completely removed within 30 days. Brenda collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands, defeated. Greg Miller stormed out of the community center, slamming the door violently behind him. Eleanor stood up again, her voice calm but firm. In the sudden quiet, in light of recent events, I nominate our rightful neighbor, she looked directly at me, for interim HOA president, someone who actually understands property rights and ethical governance. Hands shot up all across the room. As the impromptu vote concluded overwhelmingly in my favor, Agent Davies leaned over slightly. Your grandfather's forensic work saved countless lives over the years, he murmured. He'd be immensely proud to see you fighting for what's right today. I watched Brenda slip out the back door, her perfect world crumbling around her. This fight hadn't just been about reclaiming my backyard anymore. It had become about truth, justice, and ensuring that nobody else in Pinecrest Gardens ever had to worry about coming home to find their land stolen by manipulative bullies hiding behind bylaws. The newly elected interim HOA secretary approached me nervously. What happens now? I looked around at my neighbors, some looking guilty, others immensely relieved, all watching me carefully, expectantly. Now, I said, taking a deep breath, we start rebuilding the right way. Frost sparkled on the polished granite of the new memorial plaque as I wiped it clean. 6 months had passed since that explosive, transformative HOA meeting, and Pinecrest Gardens had indeed transformed, but in ways nobody could have predicted back then. Need help with that? Agent Davies asked, appearing beside me with 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed me one, and together we surveyed the beautifully landscaped, legal memorial garden we had collectively designed and built. It's perfect just as it is, I replied, stepping back to admire our collaborative work. Unlike Brenda's illegal, divisive graveyard on my property, this serene memorial garden sat on properly designated community land near the park entrance. The small, tasteful granite markers honored the same loved ones, but now everything was done legally, respectfully, and with genuine community consensus. Have you heard anything from the Millers? Davies asked, blowing gently on his coffee. I shook my head. Not a word since the state launched the tax audit into the HOA's finances under their leadership. Eleanor says they sold their house quickly, at a loss, to a young family and supposedly moved somewhere down in Florida. Funny how some people run the moment they face real consequences, he observed dryly. We walked companionably along the winding path toward my property, specifically toward the area where my old tool shed used to be. In its place now stood a small, modern, and surprisingly elegant building. The foundations of forensics, the Harold Mitchell exhibit, showcasing my grandfather's significant contributions to law enforcement and criminal justice. School buses visited weekly for educational field trips, and the FBI had even started hosting popular community outreach events there. Your grandpa's methods truly revolutionized how we investigate crimes, Davies said, watching a group of engaged high school students inside. That unique licensing agreement you ultimately worked out with the Bureau was brilliant, Ms. Mitchell. The FBI gets to continue legally using his invaluable techniques, ensuring justice for victims, and you get to make sure his legacy actively helps people, not just sits in archives. The royalties are just a bonus, I finished smiling. It felt good. A group of younger children ran past us, laughing, toward the museum entrance, their teacher struggling good-naturedly to keep up. I smiled again, remembering how Brenda Miller used to constantly complain that children made too much noise in the neighborhood. "President," Eleanor called, waving cheerfully from my front porch. Since becoming my highly effective vice president in the new transparent HOA, she'd taken to dropping by regularly with freshly baked goods and neighborhood updates. Today, she carried a stack of papers along with her signature cookie tin. "More complaints?" I asked, climbing the porch steps. "Quite the opposite," she replied happily, spreading the papers on my porch table. "These are thank you notes. Mrs. Peterson wants you to know her grandson's memorial here is even more beautiful and peaceful than she ever imagined. The Johnsons appreciate the fantastic new playground equipment we installed in the park, using some of the initial licensing funds. And Mr. Rivera says the expanded community garden project has given him a real sense of purpose since his retirement." I flipped through the heartfelt notes, amazed and genuinely touched by how much had positively changed. The same neighbors who had once passively allowed Brenda's bullying tactics now actively worked together, suggesting improvements, volunteering time, and rebuilding trust. "There's something else," Eleanor said, pulling out a folded newspaper. "That story about what happened here, it got picked up by the National Newswire. Apparently, 3 other neighborhoods across the country dealing with similar HOA disputes have reached out to our new HOA board, asking for advice." Davies whistled softly. "Looks like you might have inadvertently found yourself a new calling, Ms. Mitchell, HOA Reform Specialist." Inside my house, the basement, once damp and dusty, had become a meticulously organized research center. FBI historians and archivists carefully catalogued the trove of newly discovered documents from my grandfather's hidden collection. What began as Brenda Miller's greedy attempt to steal my land had accidentally unearthed a priceless treasure trove of forensic history. That evening, we held a vibrant neighborhood potluck in the newly renovated community center. People who barely spoke 6 months ago now chatted easily, like old friends, sharing food and laughter. When I stood up to give a brief welcome speech, the room fell respectfully silent. "6 months ago," I began, a little nervously, "I came home from a year away to find strangers digging graves in my yard." A ripple of uncomfortable, knowing laughter went through the crowd. Understandably, I was angry, hurt, and confused. But looking around this room now, I see something good, something positive that nobody could have predicted emerging from that mess. We're not just neighbors anymore. We're becoming a true community. I raised my glass toward the large window, where the soft lights of the new memorial garden twinkled peacefully in the distance. "Sometimes," I continued, my voice filled with emotion, "the best things grow from the worst situations." My grandfather spent his life relentlessly searching for truth. And in a strange, unexpected way, that's exactly what happened here. We found our truth together as a neighborhood. Later, as people began to drift home, content and connected, Agent Davies lingered behind. "You know," he said quietly, his expression serious again, "we found something else in those basement documents yesterday. Something potentially big." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of big?" He glanced around, instinctively, ensuring we were completely alone. The kind of big, he lowered his voice, that might finally explain why the government, and perhaps others, were so intensely interested in that specific plot of land back in the 1940s. The kind of discovery that suggests your grandfather might have hidden much more down there than just old papers and forensic methods. I suddenly remembered Grandpa's cryptic final words in his will. Protect the land. What lies beneath is only the beginning. Are you saying, I whispered, a new chill tracing its way down my spine, there's more? Just then, Agent Davies's phone buzzed insistently. He checked the caller ID and frowned. We'll talk tomorrow, he said quickly. Seems like Pinecrest Gardens isn't the only place where the past is suddenly and dramatically resurfacing. As he walked briskly away toward his car, I gazed out at my property, once stolen, now restored, thriving, yet possibly hiding secrets deeper and more complex than even I could imagine. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I'd never take another extended vacation without installing a very robust security camera system. This story offers a powerful reminder that standing up for yourself, even when you feel isolated or overwhelmed, is crucial. It highlights how unchecked power, like that wielded by the HOA president, can lead to corruption and harm within a community. However, it also demonstrates the strength found in unexpected alliances, like the narrator's partnership with the FBI and her supportive neighbor, and the surprising ways hidden history can resurface to change the present. Ultimately, it teaches us that perseverance, seeking truth, and fostering genuine community connections can overcome deceit and lead to positive transformation, sometimes unearthing valuable legacies in the process. What would you do? What would you have done if you returned home to find your yard turned into a cemetery? How would you have handled the power-hungry HOA and the discovery of your family's secret history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories.